Coming up on UGTV, Board of Commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Tonight's commission meeting. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Roll call: Markley, Walters, here. Bilbrook, here. Bynum, here. Walker, here. Townsend, here. McKiernan, here. Mugia, here. Johnson, here. Kane, here. Holland,
here. All right, this evening the invocation is being given by Reverend Dr. Clarence Miller III of Sound of Worship Ministries. We ask that you please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly Father, we come first saying thank you for allowing us to gather and assemble here on this day. Lord, we thank you for everything you've done up to this point. Lord, we give you all praise, honor, and glory. Right now, we ask that you open up our hearts and minds, that we'll be able to receive what you have for us on this night. Lord, we thank you for all the officers that are here on tonight, and we pray that you continue to be with them as they keep our city streets safe. And we'll give you all praise, honor, and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Let every heart say amen.
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 I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend, for being here tonight. I'd like to ask the clerk if there are any revisions to tonight's agenda.
There are no revisions to the agenda.
All right. We will begin then with the mayor's agenda, which is a presentation of police awards, and for that I will turn it over to Chief Ziegler.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, County Administrator Doug Bach, and appreciate everybody being here tonight. Tonight's a great night. Tonight's a night that we get to celebrate and recognize the good work that's done by members of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, the public, as well as the U.S. Marshal Service. And I just want to remind everybody that this is just a snapshot of the awesome work that's done every day in our city by our officers on the streets. They do a phenomenal job. And some of the awards you hear tonight are rather incredible to me. You're going to hear about a little girl that was abducted and was found with the assistance of the media. You're going to hear about an individual who was armed, and our officers de-escalated the situation using good verbal communication and didn't have to use deadly force. You're going to hear about a burglary suspect caught. And it's just amazing work, but it's done day in and day out by our officers. And these guys deserve recognition tonight, but I don't want to forget our officers that are still working out on the streets doing the same kind of stuff. So having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Major Dungan, and he's going to go through the awards tonight.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Bach, Commissioners, I would like to thank you for your time and your being here for this year's Kansas City, Kansas Police Department Award Ceremony. The men and women of this great department do great things every day, and it is our privilege to acknowledge just a few of them. I would also like to thank the family members, because without their loving support, the officers of this department would not able to do the great things that they do. I would also like to thank Chief Ziegler, because of his leadership, and he's just leading the department in a great direction, and we're far and above behind what a lot of the departments are. And a lot of the departments are modeling their department after what we've done thanks to his leadership. So to begin, we're going to start with 502 Minnesota, Captain Herron, Sergeant Holloway, Sergeant Faulkner, Officer Gumpert, Officer Minnick, Officer Blake, Officer Shore, Officer Gambrell, Officer Weaver, Officer Moulin, Officer Crawford, Officer Edwards, Officer Semenich, Officer Dent, Officer Gardner, Officer Dundovich, and Officer Lill. On 12/16 to 2016, Sergeant Faulkner, Officer Gumpert, and Officer Minnick were on the scene at 502 Minnesota on a disturbance. The manager of the hotel had asked officers to remove a suspect who had been causing a disturbance at the location. The suspect also showed an NCIC warrant. As the officers were attempting to gain access into the room, he started firing shots through the door and was striking the officers. SOU was paged out for the barricaded suspect. Throughout the whole incident, the suspect repeatedly fired rounds at SOU officers. Officer Dundovich was on scene assisting SOU officers who were attempting to explosively breach the door because we weren't able to get up to it from all the shots being fired. After deploying smoke into the room, the suspect attempted to escape through the stairwell, which was being secured by Officer Lill. The suspect was still armed and confronted Officer Lill with the weapon. He then returned to the room, dropped his weapon, and gave himself up, so he was taken into custody without loss of life. So I want to thank these officers for a great job at 502 Minnesota. Okay, Deputy U.S. Marshal Volk, Deputy U.S. Marshal Howard, Deputy U.S. Marshal Flanagan, Deputy U.S. Marshal Wallace, Detective Martin, Special Agent Roberts, Deputy U.S. Marshal Johnson, Special Agent Arnold. On 4/22/2017, several members of the U.S. Marshals Task Force had come in on their day off and attempt to locate Mincio Lansdow, who had killed Casey Eaton. Casey Eaton was the sister of a young child that was abducted about 15 years ago and taken over to Missouri and killed. They tracked the suspect to location and felt he may be inside. The homeowner gave consent for officers to search the resident. When they entered the residence and started searching, the suspect began shooting at federal officers. The federal officers backed out and SOU was called in for the barricaded suspect. Throughout the night, the suspect repeatedly fired off rounds at officers until he eventually gave himself up after he requested a shower. So I would like to commend these officers for a great job and doing great service for our city. Officer Baker, Officer Locke, Officer Janesco, Officer Hockett, and Officer Wilcox. On 5/9/2017, officers were on the scene of a quadruple homicide at 1901 South Bokee. Dispatcher Cedars within minutes had the tag information on the suspect vehicle and his address. Officers could respond to the location. Upon officers' arrival, the suspect was saying goodbye to his family as he was attempting to flee the metro area. With dispatchers Cedars' quick action, the suspect without his quick action, the suspect would have escaped. Officer Baker and Janesco responded to the location and confronted the suspect from the quadruple homicide. The suspect fled into the woods, and Officer Baker and Janesco started setting up a perimeter. Officer Hawk and Officer Locke were the second unit on the scene and gave foot pursuit of the suspect as he attempted to flee the perimeter. Officer Wilcox was called in to conduct a canine track. Officer Baker, Officer Locke, and Officer Wilcox placed themselves at risk because it was believed the suspect may still be armed. The canine tracked to the location of the suspect and he was taken into custody. I want to thank these officers for a great job. Sergeant Graves and Officer Fithian. On 9/7/2017, Acting Captain Graves and Officer Fithian responded to the location of an unarmed disturbance. The suspect was holding his mother at knife point and wouldn't let her leave the house. Officers entered the residence at their own peril and were able to talk to the suspect into releasing the victim, and she was escorted out of the apartment. The suspect kept stating he wanted officers to shoot him and kill him. Acting Captain Graves de-escalated the call and spoke with the suspect for over 40 minutes. The suspect finally put down the knife and gave himself up, and so he could get the treatment that he needed. These officers did a great job. Captain Burdon, photographer Moore, and editor Cott from Channel 41. On 7/12/2017, officers responded to the list location 51 South 7th on a stolen vehicle that still had a 4-year-old child inside of it. Sergeant McGee began immediately pinging the phone of a phone that was being left in the car. Both KCMO and KSHW's helicopters were down, so Channel 41 offered SkyTracker to assist in locating the victim, the car, and the child. After the pinging was done, we sent that information straight to 41, and within a short time, they were able to locate the vehicle out in Tonganoxie, Kansas. The 4-year-old child was seen, and officers responded to the scene, and Captain Howard, as you may have seen on the video, thanks to these gentlemen's great help in the city, you can see Major Howard actually hugging the child as she came out of the car. And thanks to their great action and the assistance of their helicopter, we were able to save this child. It was very hot that day. There was a lake right next to the car. Greatly appreciate Channel 41 for what they did. When I was appointed as a member of the award committee, the rest of the committee, which consists of Captain Heron and Lily Sheff and Sergeant Allen, came to me and spoke that a lot of officers do a lot of great things that don't fall underneath the criteria of the awards that we have. So they talked to me about creating another award so these officers could get it. I looked into several other departments, Los Angeles, New York, Houston, Chicago, and I didn't find anything that really met what we needed. So I got with Major Waldeck, and we talked about an award And I researched it, and it was presented to the chief, and he approved it. And it's going to be the Lancaster Melton Award of Merit. Lancaster, as we all know, Detective Lancaster and Melton were killed last year. Detective Lancaster, when he first became a detective, I assigned him a case about Jerry Sport. Jerry Sport was going throughout the city, and he was breaking into construction sites and stealing property of these houses. He had 3 houses where he actually went and took all the stolen property, including floors and kitchen counters and paint and all this stuff, and he was rebuilding houses of his own. Due to Detective Lancaster did such an awesome job that when we went to these houses and we served a warrant, we pulled up floors, we tore down sheetrock, all the stuff that was taken out of these houses. That's just the dedication that he had to this job. Captain Melton, the one thing I remember most about him is every morning about 4 in the morning he'd get a Facebook page saying, "Hey, I'm out running, so anybody want to join me?" Then he'd be the first one into work and the last one to leave. So this award was dedicated to them. The award would be awarded to hardworking officers that put the colleagues and citizens of Kansas City, Kansas above themselves. This includes but not limited to officers who make outstanding arrests or dedicate long and countless hours to accomplish an extensive task that make Kansas City, Kansas a safer place to work and live. Captain Owens. Captain Owens was nominated for this award for the hard work he done promoting and establishing the DDAC zone in East Patrol Station. Captain Owens was the driving force behind DDAC zone, and because of his hard work, and the crime in the zone has greatly diminished. The last report that was presented had 0 hot spots in the DDAC zone. In the 22 years that I've been on the department, I've never seen the crime in that area that low. This was because Captain Owens had worked effortlessly promoting and encouraging officers to be active within the DDAC zone. Captain Owens not only got out there and handed out surveys with his officers, but he also worked side by side with officers on traffic enforcement and several other self-initiated activities. Captain Owens spoke with community groups and met with business owners within the affected area and gathered all the intel and stats associated with the zone. He created a video and spoke with officers at roll call explaining how DDAC zone had worked in other cities and how it would work within our city. And the DDAC zone along Central Avenue has just been an amazing accomplishment. So, Captain Owens, great job. Detective Littlefield, Officer Fowler, and Officer Hopkins. Between 8/6/2014 and 10/15/2016, the suspect, Alberto Matabera, he was a Hispanic male, had the single females who lived with in Woodview Ridge apartments living in fear. There were 6 confirmed rapes and about 20 other cases where the suspect had climbed up on the victim's balcony, but it was unable to gain entry into the apartments. Detective Littlefield worked all the cases related to the suspect. Because of Detective Littlefield's work ethic, passion for the job, and long hours, he was able to charge the suspect with 6 different rapes that had occurred. When he presented the case file to the district attorney's office, he received a $1 million warrant on the suspect. After Detective Littlefield identified and received the warrant on the suspect, Officer Fowler and Hopkins began attempting to locate the suspect who evaded the police for over a year. They worked long hours locating and sending off suspects' work locations and houses where he was visiting. They were in the process of putting up cameras at one of the locations when they observed the suspect's vehicle. They waited for him to show up, and after a short foot pursuit, they took him into custody. Great job, Detective Littlefield. Officer Hickerson and Officer Douglas. On 6/2/2017, at about 21:20 hours, Officer Hickerson and Douglas observed a suspect breaking into a vehicle on the side of I-635. A pursuit occurred and the suspect went off-road at about I-635 in Kansas and was eventually taken into custody. After further investigation, the suspect was found to be wanted for about 10 auto burglaries throughout the city and aggravated assault from when he shot at one of the business owners when he was trying to steal a car. He was also a felon and was found in possession of several handguns. Because of these officers' great dedication and great job, a very dangerous suspect was taken off the streets. Good job. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Ziegler.
There's a lot of good work by our officers. So, we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. There's an award that the chief can give out. It's called the Special Project Ribbon. And we haven't ever given one out since I've been chief. I can't recall the last time the ribbon was given to anyone. But tonight I want to recognize an officer who, he's not out fighting crime and tracking down bad guys and catching robbery suspects and homicide suspects, but his work is just as important to our police department. Cameron Morgan, can you come on up? Cameron Morgan, he came into the chief's office in 2015, and he's done some amazing things for the police department that there's no amount of money we could ever pay him, but that's how much we value it. He's done things like he got our Facebook page reinvigorated. We got about 40,000 followers. He started Facebook Live, which is every month we engage the community, and they get to send in questions and ask questions of me and other people. He's got the tweet-alongs. He's done numerous videos for us. The videos have been car stop videos for the high school kids. He's done a CIT, our Crisis Intervention Team video. He did 2 memorial videos, one for Detective Lancaster, one for Captain Melton. He handles all of our recruitment for the police department, and he does some things that I would have never thought of, things like geofencing around colleges so we can capture kids when they're on their cell phones who are interested in law enforcement. He just recently did, and you may have gotten these in your mail if you're a BPU employee, he sent out 68,000 flyers that he created with the BPU bills in hopes to recruit people from our community to become police officers. So, I can't forget this, his passion. I'd have been remiss. His big passion is drones, right? He loves drones. So he comes to me and says, Chief, we need a drone. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do with the drone? Well, we can do all kinds of neat things. And I go, like what? He says, well, we can take pictures, we can take video, and it's got a FLIR that we can see through the trees, and we can search for people who are missing and little kids. And I'm like, Cameron, I'm like, ugh. I'm like, how much does this thing cost? It's only 15 grand, but we'll use it. And I'm like, I said, okay. I said, all right, let's get the drone for you. So he's helped create the policy for that. He's helping work create a city ordinance for that. Our Leo, our mascot, he's the one that took that bull by the horn. He was the only guy in the office that didn't laugh at me when I said, hey, man, let's get a mascot. He took it to heart, and he helped come up with Officer Leo, who's our mascot. So normally this is just a little ribbon, right? Just a little ribbon you put on your uniform. But we got something special tonight. I'm not allowed by the company to say what this looks like, right? But it has to do with his filmmaking capabilities and all the work that he's done in making videos. So you guys guess what that looks like. I can't say it. I was told I couldn't say it. Well, that's it for the awards ceremony. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and we really do have a great department. They do amazing things, and we have amazing partnerships, as you've heard tonight. We got partnerships with the media, the U.S. Marshal Service, and those are helping us bring crime under control in KCK. So thank you, Mayor, for letting us present at the commission meeting. Thank you, Commissioners, and Mr. Bach.
Before we dismiss, I do want to recognize a special guest, former Chief Miller, who's now U.S. Marshal, is here. Welcome, if we can recognize you. But I just want to say again, thank you to the men and women in blue who, every day who put their lives on the line for our safety and for the great work that you do. Let's give all these folks who received awards today another round of applause. We will take a 5-minute recess to allow people to transition out of the room before we resume our meeting. Thank you.
There are refreshments out in the lobby area also.
Go get a cookie. We are back in order, or we aspire to be back in order, I should say. All right. That was item number 1. Item number 2 are voting delegates to the Kansas Association of Counties. It will be Commissioner Walters and Bridget Cobbins and Kathy Briney as alternates. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
It is properly before us. Roll call.
Roll call Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, let the record show Commissioner Murguia did not bring a cupcake for everyone.
But I did get one.
I'd like that written into the record, please. No, thank you. That brings us to our consent agenda. Would anyone in the audience tonight, a commissioner or staff member, like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Anything not so removed will be voted on by a single vote.
Move to approve all as submitted.
Second.
Let the record show no one is setting an item aside. It is properly before us. Roll call.
Roll call Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, that brings us to the standing committee agenda. We have an ordinance for Leavenworth Road from 38th Street to 63rd Street, authorizing the chief counsel to institute eminent domain proceedings when necessary. Is there a motion on this item?
Move approval. Second.
There's a motion, a second. Commissioner Kane.
Is this part of where it's going to cost $5 million more than what it would have if we left it in the ground?
Yes, this is where we will spend $5 million to do it correctly.
All right, well, Administrator, didn't we get an award for what we did down there on, Jesus Christ, I worked there.
Merriam Lane.
Merriam Lane. We received an award on that. Why wouldn't we go ahead and try to do something like that at a less expensive cost?
I believe we've already adjudicated this issue unless we want to re-debate it. I will take that as a speech against.
Absolutely.
All right, any other comment? All right, roll call.
Roll call Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
No.
The vote is 8-1. That motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 2, a resolution for the abatement of special assessments.
Move to approve as submitted.
All right, that item is properly before us. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Roll call Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to a special item on the administrator's item number 1, honorary street designation. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you giving me a minute to speak on this issue. In 1997, 20 years ago, I was, at that time, just a young mom.
Can you pull your microphone a little bit closer,
I certainly can. Thank you. In 1997, I was just a young mom. I had one small daughter at the time, and I was working at a community-based organization doing what I thought was my very best to help Wyandotte County be a better place. But even then, at that somewhat young age, I'd been around long enough to know that our community was at a real crossroads, and something dramatic really needed to happen to turn the tide for the future of Wyandotte County. I will admit I was already very proud to have Carol Marinovich as our mayor, if for no other reason than she was our first woman mayor of KCK, but also because I'd seen enough of her vision and determination to be a change agent for our wonderful town. Then one day, out of the blue, she called and asked if I would join her and a team of committed community volunteers to support and rally for unification of city and county governments. That was not a difficult decision for me. And I became an active member of Citizens for Consolidation. During that campaign, I could sense that I was participating in something really important for KCK and Wyandotte County. I spoke to groups all over this community, and I told them why I believed in the vision of a unified government. It didn't take me long to see that others were absolutely not just ready, but actually hungered for a new way for Wyandotte. As history showed, that historic vote on October 1 of 1997 brought a landslide victory for consolidation. The promise of consolidation was, in my opinion, not a promise to make everything in our community perfect in 1 or 2 or 5 or even 10 years. It was a promise to do things differently. It was a promise to work together as one body to innovate, collaborate, seek best practice, and change the way we improve our community. I think the evidence 20 years later is pretty overwhelming. Are we perfect? No. Do we have work to do? Of course. But I just want to say that I respect each and every elected member of this body that I've had the distinct honor of serving with during these current times, and I've seen with my own eyes the commitment of our mayor and our commissioners, and perhaps even more importantly, our workforce here at the Unified Government, to innovate, to question approaches and methods, and find new and better ways to provide the services that we are charged to bring to this community. So 20 years later, I've served as a volunteer member today of the community that has planned a celebration that we hope everyone will attend this Saturday, and also hopefully more ways to educate our younger residents on the history of this unification story, just how far we've come in this place I call my home. And I'm really pleased that tonight we're taking one small step toward giving Carol Marinovich just a measure of the place in history that she is rightly due. It was clear that unification was only going to happen if we had a political leader with the vision, stamina, and the will to adopt its mantle and see it through to its success. And we had that leader in Carol. And so tonight I'm asking my fellow commissioners to join me in renaming this small stretch of 7th Street in her honor. And I thank you very much, Mayor, for allowing me to take a few moments to make these remarks.
I will take that as a motion. In favor?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it is properly before us. Seeing no discussion, roll call.
Roll call: Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Aye. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
I'd like to add my aye to that as well, and for the record to please show a unanimous vote by this commission. And again, I'd like to reiterate the invitation to the whole community. Saturday, October 14th from 1 to 4 p.m. at Community America Ballpark, the T-Bone Stadium. There will be a community gathering. It's a free event with food and prizes. We hope everyone will come and be a part of this celebration of how far our community has come in the last 20 years, but really to focus on what great future we have in the next 20 years. So thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. And it's a privilege to be able to honor Carol Marinovich in this way. All right, that brings us to item number 2, an ordinance and issue of industrial revenue bonds for the Amazon project. Mr. Bach, do you have anything you'd like to say about this?
The issuance of the industrial revenue bonds is in keeping with the original development agreement we did for the Amazon project. I think we had authorized for an amount up to $310 million for this project. Typically, we'd probably put this on consent agenda. I didn't put it on there. I made that mistake of putting it on the full agenda, so this usually goes to our consent agenda because it's in line with the directives that's already been given by the governing body, and we'll do multiple ones through this time period. I would like to recognize Angela Harshberger, Management Analyst, Economic Development. Angela, if you please stand, and we can bring her forward for questions if you'd like. But Angela has notified me earlier this week that she's moving on to bigger things. She's been hired by the private sector to move on for the development. She's been a very good employee for us. Really look forward to her doing great things for us, but I wish her well in her future. With that, I'd recommend this for approval.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
All right, it is before us. Please note, there will be other issuances for this project.
Yes.
But in keeping with our practice, they will be on consent. Of course, if any commissioner ever wants to discuss that item, it can be pulled from consent and fully discussed. We've already gone through this. Yeah, we've already gone through it. That's why we'll go through it on consent in the future. All right, seeing no conversation, roll call.
Roll call: Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to item number 3, an assignment, change of ownership in Legends Auto Plaza. Mr. Bach, do you have anything you'd like to say about this?
That is exactly what this is. Per our development agreement, if the owners of this property wanted to transfer the ownership to someone else, there's a clause within it that states that they have to do so to somebody that has of equal value of ownership that they do, and be able to demonstrate that they can do it at the capacity they are. They submitted that to us. We went through their financial records, and indeed they are of the same keeping. Thus forward, we're bringing it forward to the governing body for approval per development agreement to let them transfer ownership.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call. Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
The next item is item number 4. It's a resolution for our first memorandum of understanding and our contract negotiations with the unions, the first of 12. This is with the Painters Union.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
All right. It is properly before us. Roll call.
Roll call. Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 8-0. That motion carries.
All right. That motion carries, and I would like the record to show that Commissioner Kane did recuse himself from that vote. Next item is I-70, the North Loop. Mid-America Regional Council is conducting a planning and environmental linkages study on the North Loop of Interstate 70 in Kansas City, Missouri. It also includes the Broadway Bridge. We have representatives from MARC, and the consulting team will be presenting on the current status.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Tonight we have with us the Director of Transportation and Environment from MARC, Ron Octopult, and he will be up to present on what we all refer to around here as the PLE.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Commission. I'd like to acknowledge the members of the MARC board. They're also on the Commission here as well this evening. Thanks for the opportunity to share an update on the Beyond the Loop study, which is the planning and environmental linkages study looking at these 2 major facilities in the region. We were originally scheduled to come talk to the Commission in the spring, in May, and the item that follows here had an impact on the schedule for the project. So we're kind of back on track and wanted to share with you where we are in this study, what we are trying to accomplish with it, and some of the next steps that we'll be going through to finish it. And where do I point this to make it flip? Here we go. So this is a very preliminary planning study. Its objectives really are to develop a regional consensus around some reasonable alternatives that we can look forward to into the future for the Buck O'Neill or Broadway Bridge and the North Loop of I-70 in preparation for more detailed design and environmental studies later, ready for the National Environmental Policy Act work that will come. The area that we're looking at is pretty broad. We're looking at the 169 corridor, really from where it intersects with Route 9 up in Clay County down to the where it connects with I-70 and the downtown street grid in Kansas City, Missouri. We're also looking at I-70 from I-670 in Kansas City, Kansas, over to where it connects back up with I-670 in Kansas City, Missouri. We're developing different alternatives for those specific facilities, but we're also looking at impacts in a larger area that surrounds the 2 facilities, and then we're developing a traffic model that's helping us to assess traffic impacts in a much larger study area that goes all the way out to 435 on the west and east, and then up to I-29 and down to the plaza area in Kansas City. The study's being conducted. MARC is really facilitating the work, but it's being funded by the City of Kansas City, Missouri, the Missouri Department of Transportation, Kansas Department of Transportation, and Unified Government are also partners in the steering committee conducting the study. So the area that we're looking at, that we're really focusing on, as I said, is the river crossing, the Broadway Bridge, and then looking at ideas for kind of future improvements to the North Loop, which is both of these facilities are old. They're designed to kind of pass design standards, and frankly, we're finding that they're really past their design life. The bridge in particular is about 60 years old. It's in poor physical condition. The MoDOT is actually very concerned about needing to do some major repairs to it, and so that's actually affected the schedule for this study. We've paid a lot more attention to the bridge earlier on than we were probably intending to. The North Loop, the issues there are it's an old facility that has very frequent interchanges, a lot more access points than we would design to modern standards. It serves as a barrier between the central business district and the River Market area in downtown Kansas City. So the city's very interested in exploring redevelopment opportunities along the corridor, as well as transportation improvements on that route. And then we're also concerned about how the system connects with the rest of the transportation system in the region. So the study was we began the study earlier in the year. We spent the first few months really working with the public and stakeholders to identify problem statements. This is an important part of the study because this document, the Statement of Purpose and Need, will be something we'll pick up in the future environmental work. We're in the process right now of evaluating alternatives, and I'll spend probably most of the time showing you what the alternatives are that we're looking at for the different parts of the study area. We're on track to be wrapping the study up probably the first or second quarter of next year, and that will then allow us to transition at least parts of the project into the next stage of environmental review. We're really looking out into the future with study. The MARC's transportation planning horizon is 2040, but we know that at least the bridge would be something that would last a lot longer than that. And so we've engaged the public in thinking about how the region might be different in 2040 and 2050, and using that information to help us develop ideas about the kind of infrastructure we're going to need for that region in the future. We've been doing a lot of public engagement work. We kicked off in February with a big event in the Central Library in Kansas City, Missouri, with about 150 people there. We were looking for input into kind of the big picture issues that we should look at in the study. And one of the interesting findings was that the group that we talked with and the folks that filled out surveys after that meeting really were focused more on the development questions around the infrastructure than the transportation. They're both important, but we saw a real interest in exploring how the investments in this infrastructure could impact development in the study area. And we took a sense of what issues were really important to the community as we continued the study. There's a lot of interest in travel choices. For instance, the Broadway Bridge has a lot of pedestrians on it, but no real safe place for them to cross. So those were some of the issues that helped us frame the problem statement in the study. We've been working closely with the staff here and understand the real concerns and interests about maintaining access to the Fairfax and West Bottoms areas, access in and out of downtown Kansas City, and opportunities to address the river in Kansas City, Kansas area.
We
and
prefer
also,
if you call that area the East Bottoms. Thank you.
Thank you. The Bottoms, how about that? We're also aware of the work you're doing on the Northeast Area Plan and coordinating with that in the study as well. So the needs that we've identified are really around the physical condition of the infrastructure, the performance in terms of traffic congestion and safety, and safety and security. And so improvements that we're looking at will all need to address those issues in order to advance into the final recommendations. And we also have a number of goals related to transportation choice, economic vitality, and sustainability and environmental considerations that are also going to help us discern between the alternatives that we're developing. So this is a list of what we're looking at right now. We've got 7 different ideas about what to do with the North Loop. We've got 3 different ideas about the bridge, and then several variations of how to handle bike and pedestrian connections on the bridge. We're also looking at the way that Route 9 connects into the downtown loop as well. So we held a public meeting in August to sort of preview these options, and have been conducting an online survey since then. And I will say that the strongest support that we've got in the whole study is really around the idea of preferring a new bridge over rehabilitating the existing Buck O'Neill Bridge, that there's a lot of desire to see that structure realigned. About half of the traffic on the bridge is actually not going into downtown Kansas City, Missouri. It's headed over to the west side of the downtown loop and going places south and west of the downtown area. So there's a lot of interest in a new bridge. In terms of where that should be aligned, there's a preference to move it farther to the west, which would actually provide some options for the railroad on their bridge that's to the east of the current O'Neill Bridge. And then I will walk through these very quickly. We have information online at the BeyondTheLoopKC.com website where all of the details about these alternatives are shown. But I just wanted to give you a sense of the things that we're looking at for the North Loop. This is really focused in the area between Broadway and the east side of the downtown loop. Early on in the study, we're very aware of the work that's been done on planning for Lewis and Clark. You'll hear more about some of that project after I'm done, but there was a real strong consensus from both your staff and the staff at KDOT that we had a good plan for what to do with the viaduct, and that's what we're planning on for the viaduct at this point. We're also looking at some ways to improve access into the bottoms, but the loop alternatives really are focused on the Missouri side. So they start with a standalone or a no-build option where we really don't do much but repair what's there. We are looking at opportunities to improve safety by consolidating some access points, so this is the safety adjustments alternative. We have a number of alignments or alternatives where we compress the footprint of I-70 and either move it to the north, south, or middle. So this is one where it goes to the north. This is one where it goes to the south. And there are a couple of different variations of where we put it through the center, which provides some additional opportunities to bridge the facility around Main Street, Delaware area. All of these options involve lowering Route 9 to grade. They all involve connections to the new connections to the O'Neill Bridge. The probably most radical option that we're looking at right now is one that would remove the lanes of I-70 through the downtown area and convert that into more of a boulevard type of a facility. All of these options that I've just been through do provide additional land for redevelopment, and so that's an area that we're exploring. We are in the process right now of trying to assess the traffic impacts of all of this. So we've not completed the modeling work, and that's an important next step. There's of these, in terms of public opinion, the numbers that I've been showing on the slides kind of indicate the level of interest or support for the options that we're getting through the online survey work. I will say that of the loop options right now, this one seems to be gaining the most support from the public. It's probably the one that will have the most radical traffic impacts and one we'll have to look at the most closely. There's also a lot of support from the public for the idea of moving Route 9 to an at-grade facility and eliminating the barrier between the Columbus Park neighborhood and the River Market. We've got over nearly 1,000 responses to the online survey. We've asked some specific questions about each alternative and provided opportunities for open-ended comments as well, and we're sorting those out right now. In terms of next steps, we're going to be completing this initial screening with traffic work. We will be coming back probably after the first of the year with another round of public meetings where we'll be able to show traffic impacts, costs for the different alternatives, and get some final refinement of those. Then we'll transition into actually documenting the study for the Federal Highway Administration and for MoDOT and KDOT. And that work will be completed in the spring. So I've been through this pretty quickly. I had 33 slides. It's a lot of information. If you are interested, I say once again, the BeyondTheLoopKC.com website has a lot of information about the project, and I'd be happy to answer questions about it at this time.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? I think it is important. I wanted to make sure that you did this presentation not only for our commission, for those who are not on the board at MARC, but also for our public to see it. I think it's important for the folks in Kansas City, Kansas to see the plans, because an impact on the North Loop and the Buck O'Neill Bridge in Kansas City, Missouri will have impacts in Kansas City, Kansas, and we want to be planful for those, and I appreciate the dialogue around this.
Appreciate that. And once again, if I could just stress, we do have this, the survey is open still, and the address is here, so if we can, it would be delightful if you could help publicize that to the community here as well.
Absolutely. BeyondTheLoopKC.com/KCK. Commissioner McKiernan.
Just one thing that you and I have talked about before, and that is you're going to extensively model traffic flow changes with any of these proposed alternatives. Because the one thing we've talked about before is I'm concerned about choke points in the through traffic system given some of the more radical of these alternatives.
Absolutely. We're developing a pretty state-of-the-art travel model, and it is, frankly, it's taking a little bit longer than we had hoped to get it up and running. We think we're a few weeks away from that, but we're developing a dynamic traffic assignment model that'll really give us a powerful tool to look at the impacts not only in the study area, but pretty far away from it as well, and in pretty significant detail.
All right, Commissioner Townsend.
Good evening. This question may be premature, but I thought I would just get it out there now. I run into daily the situation as I head east on 70, traffic that has to merge into 70, going across traffic that is also exiting. Will these plans affect that situation so that you don't have that any longer, merging traffic and exiting traffic crossing one another?
At what location?
Oh, I'll give you, for instance, Oak, or coming off Main onto 70, and then you're trying to exit and get into the downtown business center, say off Oak.
Absolutely. That's really one of the fundamental traffic performance issues we're looking at in the downtown loop. There's so much weaving and merging that happens because of the frequent access points that, yes, that is an issue we're paying close attention to.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item is a presentation on the Lewis and Clark Viaduct, which is very relevant to this last conversation.
All right, so these were, Mayor and Commission, these were scheduled together very intentionally by staff to help the Commission see like the full picture of what the North Loop project and also our Lewis and Clark Viaduct as they interplay. Tonight, we do have Leroy Kane from KDOT's Metro office. He's their Metro engineer. You want to raise your hand, Leroy? He's here if you do have questions of KDOT particularly, but tonight our presentation will be from Tim Curry with Burns and Mack. Kim. Did I say Tim? Sorry. That's okay. It's been a long day. There's that.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commission. We're excited on behalf of KDOT to announce that they will be reconstructing the westbound Lewis and Clark Viaduct Bridge. So I'm here to give you a little more details about that project. Oop, wrong one. Here we go. So just for history, the Lewis and Clark Viaduct, the eastbound part of it, has been around about 100 years now. The westbound bridge has been around about 60 years. These are historical postcards just showing you the transformation of the viaduct from the beginning. Will it back up? There we go. Okay, so KDOT previously completed a study in 2012 to evaluate the whole Lewis and Clark Viaduct, and in that study they took a look at not only condition, but also connectivity into Kansas City, Kansas from I-70. This exhibit shows you the condition of the entire Lewis and Clark Viaduct, and the red portion on the westbound lanes is in the worst condition. Interestingly, the oldest piece of the viaduct on the eastbound side is in better condition, and we attribute that to the construction practices that were used 100 years ago using rivets versus the construction practices that were used 60 years ago with welded steel. If you took a look at all the river crossing bridges throughout the Kansas City metro area, all of them but the Buck O'Neill Bridge and the Lewis and Clark Viaduct have been addressed, either rehabbed significantly or replaced. So out of that study, KDOT came up with a phased plan to reconstruct the entire Lewis and Clark Viaduct. The red portion is what the project that we're here to talk about today. It's the only project that has been funded for design and construction to date. The blue and green projects will be later phases as KDOT's able to take care of them. And then the connecting links into downtown Kansas City are optional phases that could be done at any time. So as I mentioned, the westbound lanes from the state line westward to the west bank of the Kansas River is the piece of the viaduct that will be reconstructed. The eastbound lanes during the construction will remain open and functioning as they exist today. Wanted to give you a timeline on the project. So KDOT will be advertising the project next Tuesday, and it will let November 15th of 2017. And after the letting, there are some steps they have to go through, and we anticipate closing down and the westbound bridge in February of 2017. There's some preliminary activities that have to happen, such as installation of all the maintenance of traffic signs. There are some temporary signals that have to be installed to help facilitate traffic. And then this is a 2-year construction project, so we anticipate the new bridge being open in spring of 2020. This has been a long project. Following the completion of the 2012 study, we did start a process to develop urban design guidelines, and we met with folks within the Kansas City, Kansas community to help us come up with what their vision was for this project as far as developing and incorporating aesthetics and the look and feel of the bridge. We wanted to get this package in place so that for the future phases of the project, that it would look like a cohesive interchange and not 3 different random projects. This just gives you a view of the existing bridges today. They're centered in an urban industrial area, with Fairfax being the oldest organized industrial area in our country. And that kind of plays into the look and feel of the project. We've kind of taken some of the limestone features and some of the strong and sturdy, hardworking look and feel to the project. And here's one of the most important things we wanted to share with you today, and that is to talk about the traffic handling during this 2-year closure. The impacts to the construction, which is the orange piece right here, that's what's being replaced, will bleed back into the Missouri side, not only impacting Kansas City, Kansas, but MoDOT and Kansas City, Missouri as well. One of the things about the downtown loop is, especially on this west side, there are not movements that get you from one route onto the next route. So as a part of that plan, we've developed what we're calling a clockwise detour, and that's our primary detour. So every major route coming into the downtown loop, if they want to go west into Kansas City, Kansas, will be directed by the signed detours to go clockwise through the downtown loop onto 670. For those that want to come into the downtown area, their first opportunity for a signed detour will be on Central Avenue onto eastbound I-70 and then into downtown Kansas City, Kansas. That being said, there is a secondary detour if travelers miss or choose to ignore the clockwise movement. They'll be directed on the blue route and have an opportunity to do a U-turn at 27th Street. We did cooperate and coordinate with MoDOT on where they preferred to have that detour movement made, and then they'll be directed onto 670 again. So part of what we're depending on is the local folks that know the area may choose to use what we're calling self-detoured routes. They can identify routes that work for them and stay off of the signed detour routes if possible. We're also suggesting that picking a route that gives you a predictable travel time may be a better option than picking the shortest route. If consistency in your travel time and your daily routine is important, we suggest that. specifically in downtown Kansas City, Kansas. Again, in this picture, the red is all the roadway networks that will be closed. And I mentioned the detour route that comes along the Central Avenue down onto eastbound I-70 and then exiting at the 3rd Street exit. We're installing a temporary traffic signal at James Street and then a temporary traffic signal at 3rd and Armstrong to help facilitate traffic flow. In addition, we're widening the exit ramp where I-70 gets off to the 3rd Street to have a second exit lane so that we can get more vehicles through that pinch point. Again, this is just to reiterate what our signed detours are. The black represents the clockwise detour around the downtown loop. The yellow is the 27th Street secondary detour onto 670. And then the green is the Central Avenue connection into downtown Kansas City, Kansas. Just for some perspective, this is a traffic exhibit showing all the traffic volumes within the downtown loop using 2016 data. So we heard about the Buck O'Neill Bridge, and for folks coming south on the Buck O'Neill Bridge going west onto I-70, there's only about 800 vehicles a day that actually make that movement. So even though these projects could have work going on simultaneously, there's different traffic markets for both of them. And then I-70 carries about 45,000 vehicles a day. Half of that will be about half of that will be the westbound traffic that will have to detour and find other routes. So we took a look with our project partners and explored what other projects might be impacting the area at the same time. We've already heard about the Broadway Pell project, and Mark will be the contact if you need information specific to that project. Mr. Acapul can help you out there. MoDOT will be completing bridge repairs on the Buck O'Neill Bridge. Right now, I think that's scheduled to be a 35-year long-term repair pending decisions that might come out of the Pell. And again, MoDOT will be the contact if you have questions specifically about that project. And then Kansas City, Missouri has a lighting project on Bartle Hall that will be replacing the lighting over 670 underneath Bartle Hall. We have coordinated with them, so when we do our initial project shutdown, they're going to not do any lane closures associated with that lighting project. In addition, during peak traffic hours, they again will not allow any lane closures during those times. We've done a significant amount of outreach, not only through the entire life of this project, but specifically in the last couple of months, we've tried to touch our partners with Public Works within the unified government, downtown shareholders. We've visited with Fairfax Industrial Association, Historic West Bottoms, folks at the downtown airport. You can see the list of all the agencies that we've met with to date, specifically to share the same message that we're sharing with you tonight. And that's the end of my formal presentation. I'd like to just speak on behalf of KDOT that at the end of the day, this is a good news that you're getting a new bridge into your community that will provide you many, many years of great access. And regardless of what happens with the downtown loop or with the future of the westbound I-70 reconstruction lanes, you're getting a new bridge into downtown Kansas City, Kansas. And for any specific questions, we have a detailed transportation management plan that we've developed, and Nicole Randall with KDOT is the public affairs manager, and her job on this project is going to be able to take people's questions, concerns, and issues that they have during the duration of the project and get the message to the people that can address the issues that are occurring. Are there any questions?
I have several. Commissioner McKiernan, do you want to go? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, and she's heard most of my questions before, but one thing that I'm thinking about is, are we going to beef up the signage for those people who go east to go west, who come around the east side of the loop? If you come around the east side of the loop, you've got to get over 1 or 2 lanes if you want to continue on 670, because there's a lot of crossing over on the south side of the loop. So will there be additional signage anticipating the fact that you're going to need to move left to continue going west? Because right now the signage isn't until roughly you get to Bartle Hall, the overhead signs, and they've got then the signs painted on the roadway itself, but they're all late if a lot of traffic wants to move. So will there be additional signage?
Can you answer that specifically? Paul Plotis with our team worked up most of the traffic control plans for the project.
Yeah, there certainly will be the orange construction signs in advance up on I-35 if you're coming down south across the river. In that specific area, I don't recall if we were able to add additional signs. The problem that you have around, like basically around the whole loop, is that you have one interchange after another, and there's a minimum distance that you can place another sign so that people can actually see the sign, read the sign, understand it before they get the next one, before they get the next one. So it's really difficult to put additional signing up. We've got signs all modified, so I know that for sure that we have modified signs up there. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm hoping you consider after 71 and 70 have all joined together on the south side, there's at least 3 overpasses before you actually get to the split where 35 and 670 split going west. I'd encourage you to consider forewarning people at least a little bit. I drive that road every day today, and there's a lot of jockeying for position today without rerouted traffic on it. And I just worry if we get a volume of rerouted traffic that there's going to be some issues on the south side.
You're talking where 12th Street comes, or 11th Street, is that 11th Street that comes on?
I'm talking on the southeast corner,
south
heading
okay.
west,
Southeast
where
corner, heading
71
west.
and I-70 join 35.
Gotcha.
And they all come together and form 670.
Right, gotcha, yes.
And there's at least 3 overpasses passing between Truman Road and then south, or north rather, that that you could, anyway, I'll leave that to you guys, but I just hope you're going to sign this so there's not a lot of last-minute lane switching at Bartle Hall.
Gotcha.
All right. I have several issues with this, and one, I'm very excited that KDOT's spending money again. I know KDOT has been heaved into chaos at no fault of your own by poor decisions at the legislature. So I'm glad that you're doing work, which is awesome. So I want to commend you for that. I'm a little concerned about the timeline, and I've spoken to different groups about the timeline on this. It seems to me to make sense that with this discussion going on with the Mid-America Regional Council and the work they're doing around the Buck O'Neill Bridge and around the North Loop, that there would be some reason to postpone this project for at least a year until that work is done so that we can integrate it fully. So here are my issues. I-70 was built to go around KCK, not to KCK. And so we lost huge chunks of our city. Strawberry Hill was decimated. Our entire riverfront was taken away. Cities across the country are actually taking down these kind of viaducts to create access to the waterfront, which is something the KC Metro has failed to do consistently forever. We have lined our riverfront with highways, railroads, and sewage treatment plants, which are really a positive impact when you're trying to enjoy the great outdoors. And I know there's a vision in Kansas City, Missouri, and I know there's a vision with Mark to look at recapturing the riverfront, particularly in the east bottoms, as we call it, what they call the west bottoms. But there is, some of that is KCK, most of it is KCMO. But any kind of economic development plan down there, we know that when cities, and St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Chicago, I mean, you go through the cities that have impacted their riverfronts positively and change their transportation thinking to augment the riverfronts rather than simply bypass them, have had huge economic development benefits. I think that's what the Mid-America Regional Council is trying to do with the Pell study, is to look at what riverfront access could be if it were not isolated with the highways. I think that the best real estate in KCK is looking out over our river, and it's completely inaccessible to the people. And so I'm concerned about spending really a ton of money on what I consider, with all due respect to the engineers that have worked on this, but I think is yesterday's plan for transportation. I want a viaduct that has light rail on it that's going to connect us to Kansas City, Missouri in a more organic way. I want to think about a kind of viaduct that's going to be multimodal in its vision, that's going to be development focused in its vision. I agree the bridge is old. I agree something needs to be done. I just think that the plan is 30 years ago. I don't think it's the best plan for the riverfront. I don't think it's the best plan for linking the two cities. It might be the best plan for moving the maximum number of cars through Kansas City at high speeds. That's not my goal. I don't want to move people through. I want to move people to Kansas City, Kansas. And I want multimodal transportation that's going to augment economic development. We have to protect Fairfax access to the interstate. No question, we can do that. But the property values, the value of our community, the east side of our community is almost completely lost today because of a terrible vision, 50 or 60 years ago, to build I-70 where they built it. They should have built, 670 was a much better idea. And now we have two of these. So I would love to see KDOT stand down for a year. I don't want to lose the money. But if you offered $60 million for redesigning transportation in KCK to link us to the jobs in Kansas City, Missouri, to link us, again, through light rail, through better options, I would be much more excited about that. And I think waiting until the Mid-America Regional Council is done with their study, because the last thing I'd want is to say, oh, this would have been great, but we already invested $60 million in something that can't be undone for another 40 years. Another generation goes by before we get it right. So I don't see why we can't stand down for a year. I've asked the governor this. I've asked our staff to reach out to KDOT about this, to stand down for a year, to look at the study that's coming out of Kansas City, Missouri, because they're thinking creatively about their riverfront. And I want to be a part of that. I don't want Kansas City, Missouri to come up with a great transportation plan and for KCK to be left out of it because the timing of our projects didn't match up. So if there's any way we could postpone this for a year, do some more evaluation with the study that the Mid-America Regional Council is doing, and then move forward with the right plan. Because it might be, and I will concede this, it might be that this bridge reconstruction is exactly what we end up needing to do. I'm not convinced of that. And so I would really like to see, a slowdown. I don't want this bid to be let in November and started in February. And I've expressed this a number of times. I want to see us wait till the study's done. So what are the chances of KDOT standing down for a year to let this organic process, this planning process, economic development process to complete before we have to let this bid? That's my question for today.
I'm going to ask Nicole or Leroy. I can't speak on behalf of KDOT at that level.
Okay. You will need to come to the microphone, ma'am.
Yep. Oh.
I'm shorter. Unfortunately, I do not have the authorization to tell you an answer on that, obviously. So what I can do is take your concerns back to the secretary and the governor's office and let them know how you feel about this. I've taken extensive notes, as have the folks with Burns and Mack, and let them know, what your concerns are.
I appreciate that. I think this is pretty urgent, and I don't know what the harm is. I don't think it's in danger of falling down. And the most dangerous part of it, which is those flyover ramps, are not being addressed in this phase. So I don't think we're addressing the most dangerous part. So I don't think it's a life safety issue. I just think it's a timing issue. So I really would like to see the timing adjusted. Commissioner Philbrook?
Thank you. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was wondering, it's like, it does seem like a really big mismatch in timing on these projects. And since I do know the federal government would really like to have a more of a regional approach to what we're doing, I would really like to suggest that the state of Kansas consider to come in compliance with that sort of an attitude. Since a lot of this money comes trickling back down to us, you know, from there. And I would like to see us working cohesively to create something good for this whole community. And as he says, not just to zoom past us as it has been set up. Because I know we can work together. There's no reason why we can't. We just have to ask for it. Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend.
Ms. Curry,
Is that microphone on?
Is it better?
No. Is the light on? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Curry?
Yes.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Sorry. I saw where you had been in touch with the Fairfax Industrial Association or through this process. If you don't mind, could you show me again the slide and describe the route that if you were heading westbound and you wanted to go into Fairfax, currently if you're westbound on 70, there's an exit and you drop right onto it. So what is this going to be like under this proposed?
So, you know, if you're coming from the east side, you know, you would go counterclockwise or clockwise around the downtown loop onto 670, get off at Central Avenue, merge onto eastbound I-70, and then you would go along 3rd Street and access the Fairfax ramp.
Okay, thank you.
And if you're coming from north, it may make more sense to go over to the Fairfax Bridge and into Fairfax from the north side. So, you know, anybody in the Northland or to the east that needs to get into Fairfax may want to consider coming in from the north.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about just being, say, downtown or coming due east from St. Louis. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and there, as I mentioned, if you're a local and you go back and forth regularly, there are other options. 12th Street goes across. Woodsweather Road goes across, Beardsley Road. There are other options to get there, but we're not going to sign those because we don't want the general public to all pick those as their detour route.
And you said once begun, this project would take 2 years?
Mm-hmm. Because of the river crossing and the height, the viaduct stands in the air, you know, there's no way to cost effectively replace it in parts.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bynum.
Well, when and if the project begins and this particular reroute is occurring, I guess my concerns lie mostly with our Fairfax district, although I do share the mayor's concerns about a long-term vision for redevelopment of this area. But Fairfax is a major economic engine. I know you met with the Fairfax Industrial Association, and I just keep thinking as I look more and more at this that I would hope that folks would work closely with not only Fairfax Industrial Association, but each and every business there. And again, with signage that promotes moving that traffic north out of Fairfax to destinations, but staying away from this as entirely as they can, because this is going to be a nightmare for me just driving my car. And so I can't imagine all of the truck and industrial traffic trying to get to or out of Fairfax using this route. So I'm just making that comment. I'm hoping that you'll work super closely with our businesses in Fairfax. Thanks.
Commissioner Philbrook.
I want to make a major statement along with what she has to say about that Central Street exit. That is fun to drive on in a Mini Cooper, but as an 18-wheeler, no thank you. It's a skinny exit, and it's not banked very well. And so, you know, I'm afraid to see how many 18-wheelers are going to end up halfway hanging over the edge of that. I have big concerns about that one.
And we did reiterate with them, again, the message, the downtown loop in its current condition doesn't provide predictable travel times. And so we reiterated with them to select a travel route that would give their business. I know a lot of the, General Motors is really dependent on pieces and parts arriving at the right time to keep their assembly line going. So again, finding a route that gives them a predictable travel time, even if it's a little bit longer than what they do today.
2 points still I want to add is that traffic will, for the longer distance truck traffic, we're anticipating they're going to come down the Fairfax Bridge area. So that's one point. The other thing is that this traffic control setup is just one phase. So once it's set up, when the project starts, it's going to be the same way for 2 years, and it won't change. So the idea is that once the folks get used to it, it's the way it's going to be. And I don't want to say used to it in terms of time and delays that you may experience, but so far as giving direction to folks and they'll figure out their route. And that way it'll be the same way for 2 years.
Well, it almost sounds to me like if I were a jogger and I try to pick my route after getting bit a few times trying to figure out which route to go, I'll figure out where not to go, and then I'll end up going where I should. That's pretty much what it sounds like to me. You're letting them have the damage and the problems to figure it out eventually. I don't know. It seems pretty cavalier to me.
All right. Any other comments or questions? I do want to thank you all for your presentation tonight. I know you've worked very hard on it. Do you have another comment, ma'am?
I just wanted to reiterate, as Kim did before, that this was a project. This is a project that is a preservation project categorically, and it is happening because there are issues that have been found with that bridge, that we feel it is pertinent to replace that bridge. And I understand all of your concerns, and they will 100% be conveyed. And we have worked extensively, and Burns and Mack has worked extensively with all of the organizations that will have to do with this. And the fact is that even though there are these detours that need to be in place, even though there will be a time period where that bridge will be closed, unfortunately, we believe that this is the best course of action.
Well, and I know this has been planned for a long time, and it's also been delayed a couple times. So I just don't see that there's a level of urgency that it got delayed for lack of funding at KDOT for a number of years. So I don't know why it can't be delayed for more planning in the metro area. So I understand this bridge is not the current bridge is not the long-term solution. This new concept may end up being the right solution. But I know it's been delayed by KDOT for a couple times for lack of funding, so I'm pretty confident it can be delayed again for a good reason. I'm planning. So that's my hope, is that we can get there and get the right solution for our metro area.
Just one thing to think about is that this is a 24-month project. And so starting in February means that it'll be under construction 2018, 2019, and then be finished at the end of 19. If it's delayed, I don't know how much flexibility there is in that schedule, but that would mean it potentially could mean another winter shutdown. So then the project just drifts
I would
a
expect
little
it
bit
would
longer.
delay it a whole year.
Oh, in that case, that's what you would do, yes.
Yeah, I would expect we would delay it for a whole year.
Yeah. As long as you're
delay
up with
starting
that.
it. Yeah, don't stop in the middle. Please.
No.
But no,
I was thinking you were suggesting starting in April or March.
No. If we do a
July.
delay, it would have to be for a full year, because Mid-America Regional Council needs at least that much time to complete their work. So I would anticipate we could hold this money for a year. It could earn interest. That would be fantastic. And then we could we might not see the interest, but it would earn it, and then we could start this at the same time frame this time next year with the Mid-America Regional Council's input, and we could say, is this the best way to spend $60 million? Because looking at that bridge picture, that was just one segment. So there's going to be another $60 million to the south or more, and then you've got the ramps to come. I mean, this is what's your total anticipation for this project? 250?
For the total cost?
Yeah.
Didn't look that up, but it's...
We're looking at a $250 or $300 million capital investment in this. I think we ought to get it right. I think we ought to take the time to make sure the planning's right before we spend $300 million for my view, 30 years ago solution. So that's my hope, is that we can take 1 year. Hey, we're the ones impacted, right? So if we're willing to, why not? All right, so that's my input. Thank you very much for your work on this. All of you have worked very hard and certainly are very qualified, so I appreciate your work. I just have my aspirations.
And I guess, one thing to add to that is if it got delayed another year and the answer was a different answer than what's on paper to date, it's going to delay more than a year. We've been in design since 2012 because of the study we did for the urban design guidelines, the preliminary design, and the final design. So it could potentially have a significantly longer impact than a 1 year delay.
No, I think that's right. If we came up, if there was a new solution, I would expect that there would have to be a whole new design thinking of it, but we wouldn't have spent $60 million already. So I think that we'd be $60 million ahead.
Yep.
Okay.
And then one last thing related to the condition. For each one of those years it gets delayed, the ability for KDOT to keep up with the maintenance and the cost for the maintenance on that aging structure keep increasing. So
I understand.
Yep.
I understand.
Thank
Sir, would
you.
you like to come to the microphone? You'll have to come to the microphone. Okay. Because we have people watching on television and they want to hear you too. Can you introduce yourself?
Leroy Kane. So to piggyback on what Kim was saying about the maintenance, we've got some problems going on with the bridge joints right now. So if we've kind of just tried to prop it up, if we don't shut this down and if the project would get delayed, we would have to do some work on those bridge joints, which is very impactful to the traffic.
Okay.
So, but I hear what you're saying, noted. I would like to see, on a personal note, I think some transit, woven into the larger picture is exciting to me. So there are multiple phases of this. Eventually, if we go to the eastbound part of it, maybe at that time we could look to adding the transit elements. Hopefully that's part of that discussion. So.
Okay. That might be it. I mean, that might be an option. So, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's not an uncomplicated project.
Yeah.
I accept that. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you all. That is our last item for the commission. We will adjourn the commission meeting and reconvene as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. The items on the Land Bank are all on consent.
Move approval of all items.
If anyone would like to remove an item, you're welcome to do so. Any item not removed will be voted on with a single vote. Roll call.
Roll call. Walters. Aye. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Aye. The vote is 8-0. That motion carries.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.